Welcome everyone to Why Soul Works. I'm Kendall Bird, Vice President here at Soul Naturals, and I am your host this evening. Welcome and thanks for joining us live. We appreciate all the participation that you provide live with us, so thank you for that. Today, we're talking about burnout. And burnout, we've all felt it in some way. It comes in many different ways, and it can be mild or it can be debilitating. It can affect our jobs, our family, and every part of our life. And we want to overcome it, but it seems like no matter what we try, it has a hold on us, and we seem to try things that make sense, like vegging out on a weekend, and come Monday morning we feel just as bad as we did before, And but to truly overcome it, we have to understand what it is, and in finding out what it is, then we can know what to do about it. And there is so much to talk about with burnout. In fact, so much that we're going to do two parts to this subject this evening and next time. It's so much to cover. So let's talk about it right now on Why Soul Works. And in fact, we're talking about it with the fantastic Dr. Alison Caldwell-Andrews, who is our scientific advisor, and she is very qualified to talk with us today about this subject. She's a former research faculty at Yale School of Medicine. She received 2 grants in mind-body medicine. She's published 30 articles in medical journals. She's a reviewer for many medical journals. She's a licensed clinical psychologist. She is currently faculty at Southern Virginia University, and she is just an amazing person, and we are grateful and lucky to have her with us today. We might have lost our connection with her. But give us just a second. We will see if we can get her on. Let me see. We've got lots of people on today chatting in from San Jose, California, Las Vegas. Thanks for texting in. See some of my friends, Lydia and Tanya and Denise, and a lot of people on there. Thank you for joining us, and we will, in just a moment, have Alison back on to talk to us about burnout. Let's go to the main screen there, Tyler. Alison.
Hey there.
Thank you. We lost you for a second.
Okay, I just refreshed and I was right back in.
Oh, good. Fantastic. So we're talking about burnout and tackling burnout. What is it? Why don't you spend a moment and tell us what it is so we can understand it better, and then let's talk about what we can do about it.
Sure. Burnout. Can I have my slides? Because that'll help me stay a little bit. Yeah. Okay, great. And I got to move myself away from where. Okay. Burnout is typically something we think of as being just in our head, and that we just need to relax a little more, maybe work a little less. But typically, people think about burnout as I've been overworked. My son has a friend who he talks about in terms of burnout. This guy's been working 60 hours a week for months, and he said, yeah, he's all done. He's on the edge. He's burned out, etc. This is very typical. Overworking, so you're exhausted all the time, both in your mind and in your body. A lot of times people think, oh yeah, you just need to go lay on the couch for a week and then you'll be better because you're just really tired. And once you catch up on your sleep, you will be fine. But people who are burned out also are having a hard time being motivated. And they sort of think, well, if you just have a little bit of rest, go on vacation for a week, then you'll get motivated again. You'll remember, oh yeah, I like this job. You don't have motivation to work. Maybe you're depressed. You're certainly dissatisfied. Lots of times people are very cynical. And you may know somebody at work who's like this. It's just Eeyore all the time. But once it's Eeyore all the time, and then it gets to where the person has no motivation, some people might generally be kind of Eeyore. But once you get to really no motivation, you're irritable more than usual. It's a real change in where you normally are. That's where you're more in burnout. Burnout isn't something that just drops on you out of the sky. It's gradual. It doesn't come suddenly. So in the little graphic, you see the person pulling the cord from the mind. However, and that's why I put burnout, it's more than just in your mind. It's also in your body. So when we think about burnout, we might think about what are the recommendations. If you look on Google, you'll find a list a lot like this. Just do this and it'll be fine. Oh, just get some support. Just talk to someone. Maybe you need a therapist. I think just journal. Journal will make everything better. Or you should exercise more. You should have better boundaries. Get more rest. Control your schedule. Take time off. Avoid doing things that are hard. Avoid effort. That's a big one, is avoid effort, avoid doing hard things. And we're going to talk about how that's not actually very helpful. Next. I've got 3 pages of symptoms here. So this is the first page. Burnout is kind of like a lot of other things where you don't have one symptom that is for sure it, and you don't have a list of, well, you definitely have these 4. It's sort of like you have a bunch of these things, more than one for sure, but not everyone has the same symptoms. It really depends on what else you're dealing with. But certainly burnout can present like you're emotionally exhausted. You just can't handle helping one more person. You don't have emotional energy for anybody. You feel like you just want to be unavailable and hide from the world. Like we talked about, cynical. You feel like you have to push yourself to do anything. This is where you think, okay, so in my job, I think, well, I have to go do some grading. Oh, I'm just going to go push myself to do grading. And with every paper that I grade, then I get to, I get up and I breathe and I think, oh, can't stand this. That would be an example of being burned out. Frustrated, little things set you off. You're really irritated. You feel drained even before you start your day. A lot of time you're drained about work the next day. You haven't even started. You might obsess about things more than usual. Next page. Next page. Oh, nope. Sorry, I missed that. You might lay on the couch all weekend and still you don't feel better. This is really a great sign, and it's going to connect to something we're going to talk about later, that where rest isn't restful. All that time you spend resting doesn't really make you less tired. You will have difficulty concentrating. You're forgetful, you feel ineffective. I definitely have talked to people who will say, nothing I do works. Nothing I do makes a difference. Physically, your appetite's all dysregulated. You're not sleeping well. You're getting sick. And then you're on your phone playing games all the time because you just want to escape. Or you're down fishing because you just want to escape. Although fishing would actually be a much better treatment for a lot of burnout than, say, games on your phone, for sure. You neglect your usual hobbies, though. Let's say your usual hobby is being out in the garden. You might start neglecting that. You're procrastinating right and left. Nothing is fun. Nothing is excited. Next page. You might find that you are buying things willy-nilly, and so your purchasing habits are kind of a mess. Your body has a lot of pain, more pain than usual. You might have flare-ups if you have a autoimmune disease or arthritis. No interest in doing anything new or fixing anything. And it's like, well, what's the point? It doesn't even matter. It's hard. Burnout is awful. Next page. Because it's stress. And so we think about stress. We talk about stress at work. We talk about stress in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder or danger. Burnout is the result of stress. It's like long-time stress that didn't get solved. So there are a lot of things you actually can do to resolve burnout, even within a job that you think is really difficult or really a burnouty job. I guess there's a word for you. And so even though we typically say, well, burnout it just has to do with work, the thing is that burnout crosses your whole entire life. So even if it just has to do with work, you're not just burned out at work, you're burned out at home also. And so since your mind-body connection is similar throughout all kinds of stress, whether it is like a traumatic stress or a illness stress, or whatever it might be, your mind-body connection has a similar response because your body is actually built to help you with stress. When you have chronic stress that you don't solve, you end up at work burned out, and at home or in the rest of your life and at work, you might also see this as adrenal fatigue. And so people who are interested in adrenal fatigue make this connection that burnout is very similar to adrenal fatigue. The only reason we might call it burnout is because it happens at work, and that's kind of what we're used to. That work might be the precipitating factor that sets off burnout. But they're both reactions to chronic stressors that don't get resolved. The solution is to find ways to resolve or get rid of, solve those stressors. And so adrenal fatigue and burnout both will do this. Responses like depression are similar in both cases. Next slide. So tonight is going to go with next time. We've got tonight as part 1 of treating burnout, and then July, we're going to talk about part 2. So we'll divide up what we're doing tonight with what we're doing in July, because there's a lot to cover. I'm going to give you some ways to manage burnout. Some of these ways are counterintuitive. That means they kind of go against the grain of what you would assume. And like we talked about, most people assume, oh, you're burned out. Yeah, you need to go on vacation. That'll fix it. But just like vacation won't really fix adrenal fatigue, it also doesn't really fix burnout. It might make you feel better temporarily, for sure, but it's not a solid fix. Next slide. One way to start is you can make a chart where you identify the factors that are contributing to your burnout. And you can call it burnout, or you can call it adrenal fatigue, or you can call it whatever you want to call it. But you know what you're focused on. You know what the thing is, the problem. And it's all of those, some conglomeration of those symptoms. And so just start writing in things that you think might make it as a contributing cause to this. And so some of those things might be financial stresses. You might have been sick. You might have an infection. You might have Lyme disease. You might feel like you don't have any support from your family, or you don't have very many friends. Maybe you're eating way too many processed foods. You have really negative self-talk. Um, it could be that you've been exposed to mold. It could be that uh, you feel like you're never doing enough work. If you feel like your coworkers think poorly of you, etc. Any of those things that you can see might be setting off your burnout, write those down, make a chart. One of the things that you want to do individually is go through each of those and think about, how can I resolve this problem? And so we'll talk about some of the physical ones today, and then we'll talk about some of the more mental ones in July. But the key here is that you identify one of the problems and start working on ways to resolve it. With burnout, it is very fixable, just like adrenal fatigue is fixable. You just have to put the time and effort into actually doing the things that fix it, rather than just feeling like you're a victim and there's nothing you can do that will make a difference. That's one of the most burning out things that you can do, is feel like, I can't help this. I can't help myself. So there's hope. Take courage. There is hope for resolving this, and hope for you to share with people who feel burned out. Okay, next slide. So, like I said, we'll discuss some physical solutions tonight. What you can eat that can help. Adaptogens, of course, are critical. Exercise that helps and hurts. Sleep. The physical and mental solutions go together. We're dividing them up for the sake of convenience, and because tonight I'm giving you a little intro to burnout, so there are fewer physical solutions that kind of are there. Like, the categories go together better. There are a lot more mental health solutions that we are going to talk about in July. Okay, next slide. Here's like a preview of what we're going to talk about in July. We're going to talk about the connection between movement and thinking, and how moving can actually help you solve problems and get through feeling stuck. We're going to talk about self-talk, which is a big deal. We'll talk about the difference between deep work and multitasking, and how multitasking actually can create a lot of burnout, and what can you do about that. We're going to talk about what you actually pay attention to, in addition to what you pay attention to, like, I can't help this. Oh, here comes so-and-so and they hate me, etc. What you're paying attention to, also your attention skills. How do you pay attention? How can you change your methods for paying attention? How can you be more skillful? We'll talk about the truth about effort and doing hard things, and how those are really, really critical actually for being happy, making effortful things happen, doing hard things. And then we're going to talk about boundaries. Okay, so that'll be a full night next time in July. Okay, next slide. Here are some physical fixes for burnout. Because burnout is really about stress and threat more than it is about you're just working a long time. So think about it this way. If you're an active person, and let's say you are out, let's say you're hiking the Appalachian Trail. Okay, so generally you're getting up when the sun comes up, or not very much later. You're working to make yourself some food. You're working to clean up your campsite. You're working to put it all back in your backpack. And then you're on the trail and you're hiking, and maybe you're hopefully with a person, another person, or at least chatting with your friends, walking all day for days and days and days. When people are at the end of their time on the Appalachian Trail, they're not really saying, they might say, oh, wow, I'm exhausted. That was awesome. Or I'm tired. I'm going to go home and rest. I'm not going to walk for days. They might say something like that. But what they're not saying is, they're not saying they're burned out. So you can work a lot. You can have physical effort happening all day long and not get burned out. Think about if you're on vacation and you're skiing. You're skiing a lot all day. You're not burned out. And so we have this idea that burnout is about being physically exhausted. Like, oh, I worked 60 hours, I worked 70. I worked 90 hours this week. I am exhausted. But your regular week, you're probably doing something for 90 hours, just not work, right? So it's really about stress and threat. It's not about hours worked. Threat happens to your body and your mind. And so we're going to look at how your body is interpreting the current situation. Because it's about your body and your mind, your body is what reacts. It's what is interpreting what's happening with a reaction. Your mind isn't there saying, oh, so wait, let's think about this. That's not how it happens. And so if I think most people have experienced a reaction to something. A reaction is really about the past. What did your body learn in the past? Not what your mind necessarily learned. Certainly the mind learning is part of it, but the mind learning piece comes after the body reacts, where you can kind of think, okay, now why did I react in that particular way? So threat happens to your body and your mind. Your reaction is your body interpreting that situation. And in order to resolve that, what you need to do is speak to your body to help your mind. And so we call this bottom-up processing, where you're using something that helps your body relax to tell your mind that you're relaxed. You've all probably done the thing where you're like telling yourself, just calm down, just stop being anxious. And it never works very well or at all. And what works better is talking to the body, speak to the body, relax. Progressive muscle relaxation is a great example, where your body becomes relaxed, your mind then becomes more relaxed. Deep breathing can also do that if you know how to do it. When you just want to use your mind and analyze things and then just use the information and ignore your body, it's just not effective. You can want to do that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do it. It's just not going to work very well. And so when you think, yeah, just be less anxious, let me analyze what's going on, there's almost never an end to the analyzing. Okay, next slide. Some physical fixes for burnout would include feeling empowered. So feeling empowered to resolve things has a physical effect. When you think, I'll just get through this, a lot of times that's kind of like a sign for burnout. I'm just going to get through this and then things will be better. I hear a lot of people say this at work. Let me just get through the next month. Let me just get through until midterms, as if the problems that they're facing will magically disappear. So ignoring things doesn't help. And I just have to try harder. Lots of times people will say that too. If I just try harder, that also is a terrible idea, because trying harder, it's like we've learned this idea that if I just do harder or faster, then that'll be better. And sometimes that's not, in fact, a lot of times it's not what makes it better. And sometimes when you just try harder, you only feel more like a victim. Like, it doesn't matter. I tried harder. I tried the hardest I ever could, and then nothing still worked. It's because you're trying harder, doing the wrong things. And so when you don't fix the problem, you don't resolve it, you just victim on. It's kind of like, let me just get more caffeine and things will get better eventually. This is a great analogy again, a great connection to adrenal fatigue. It's very much the same thing. Next. So like I'm saying here, burnout is just like adrenal fatigue. It's like I read my mind with the next slide. We got resilience, energy, endurance, interest, happiness, motivation. Those are normal states for people who are not burned out or fatigued. This might seem kind of crazy because the number of people who experience burnout and adrenal fatigue is just staggeringly huge. It's something that's become fairly accepted in our culture. We just sort of believe that it's normal to have depression, to have poor resilience, to have no energy, to have really low endurance. That's sort of normal. And so we're like, yeah, that's just the fate of being human. I guess you just do this and take a vacation once in a while and maybe it's worth it. So let's kind of rebel here as a group and just say, we're not going to take this anymore. We want to get back to where I'm a person who has actual creativity. Creativity happens when you're not so burned out, when you're sleeping better, when you're more more nourished, etc. So lots of people don't experience this. Your body may be made to manage stress, but what we're doing is we're handling chronic stress without solving it. We're not solving the problem, and that's what's creating the burnout is we're not solving this problem. And instead we try to cope with it by drinking more caffeine, maybe sleeping less, pushing ourselves harder. We victim on, right? Next. And so you can start now instead of waiting and just feeling, you probably do feel really overwhelmed and hopeless. That's kind of normal. That's part of being burned out is feeling hopeless and like there's nothing you can do. And you might want to be passive. Think about the way we grew up. We grew up where being passive was rewarded, being active was punished almost all the time. When you try to solve a problem, reach out, go out and do something, pick out your own clothes when you're 2 years old, something like that, it ends up that people stop you and they will say, stop being so active, go be passive. Of course, they're not saying that out loud, really. They don't even realize that's what's happening. But that is what's happening. You're being kind of told activity is dangerous. And if you're just passive and sit around and wait and you're quiet, then it's better. Especially better when you go to school and you sit quietly in school and then you go home and you quietly do homework. Oh, people think you're an amazing person. And so you're learning that passivity is the safest way to be. Activity is dangerous. So that might be one reason why we avoid starting doing things. We avoid taking action because our whole lives being passive has been rewarded. So right now, what if you start by just writing down what is coming to your mind as you're going through these slides with me? What is coming to your mind that you can do or that you need to do? Write down a few things. Maybe there's a couple people that you need to text. Write those down. And so as soon as I finish, then you can take that little list and maybe spend 1 or 2 minutes fleshing those out a little bit so you can do those things. You can act, get started acting. Next slide. We think that avoiding stress is like avoiding effort. And if we have it easy, then that will be better. And this is one of the biggest counterintuitive things is that's not like that. Making things easy actually doesn't do a good job of fixing anything for you. Putting effort into things really helps. It kind of helps liven yourself up. Now, depending on how fatigued, how adrenal fatigued, or how burned out you are, you may need a little bit more help than the person who's a little less burned out might need. And so when we're talking about you need good nutrition, maybe you need help in getting good nutrition in you. Maybe you need somebody to bring you a couple weeks of really good meals or really help you get that going, depending on how burned out you are. It is okay to ask for that kind of help. Do what you can because eventually you won't need that help because you will have more energy. And so think about the effort you're putting into digesting food that's really bad for you. There's a lot of wasted energy that goes into there. And it's really stressful on your body to try and operate without good nutrition. That's actually really stressful. And so putting the effort into obtaining and preparing food that actually feeds your body well is restful, not stressful. And so think about, and maybe just write down a couple things. What can I eat that'll help? Maybe you could start with just one raw apple every day. And so you just cut up your apple. Maybe you go get some really cool cheese to have with your apple. And then look forward to that. That's one little thing you're doing that is putting you more on the plus side than on the negative side. Next. Also, here's a list actually of foods that do help. Many of you probably know this, so I'm just going to go really quickly. But just as a reminder, you need good fats. I'm in the middle of doing a lot of research on fats. Boy, let me tell you, the more articles I read, the more I think, holy cow, we need those omega-3s. We need that perilla oil. We need that sacha inchi oil so much. Those good fats are really necessary for your body, and eating a lot of bad fats is very stressful for your body. So seriously limit those bad fats. Seriously limit any ultra processed foods. Try to eat foods that you make at home that you can pronounce the ingredients, right? Those sorts of things. Drink plenty of water. Help your body with more enzymes so that you can reduce the stress of digestion. Taking enough fiber. I read this study recently that showed the more fiber people ate, the less likely they were to have anxiety and psychological distress. And I thought, we talk a lot about the mind body connection. And I know back in the 1990s, that was my thing. I was saying, okay, this is one of the things I want to do. I want to show that what you eat makes a difference in terms of your level of depression. And back in the 1990s, people thought I was totally nuts. And that was just super fringe. But now, look at what we're doing. We've got studies saying the more fiber you eat, the less anxious you are. That's pretty cool. Next slide. When you change your food habits, the effort that you spend changing a habit really pays off. You can use willpower, and I'll talk about this again. Willpower, 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 all day long. We've been talking about this since 2013, where we talked about willpower and cinemate. And willpower is a really finite resource. You don't have a ton of it because the job of willpower is to help you create habits. And then the habit will just last as long as you can nurture it. And once you get the habit in place, you don't have to put a lot of energy into even nurturing it. And so think about long term here. You're not building Rome in a day. You're going to be reasonable. You're going to be wise. You're going to do this in the order it needs to be done in. And so you're going to work to build your habits long term instead of freaking out, doing all the things the first week. I think sometimes about people who hear something's coming, and I've certainly gotten sucked into this. Some bad thing is coming. You better get prepared. And so then all of a sudden you drop all this money on getting prepared. And the next week, your living expenses are due. You need to pay your rent or your mortgage and buy groceries, and you have no money because you spent them freaking out about something. And so think about, how can I be wise as I create these habits? So I'm not going to be changed entirely by next Friday. That's not how it works. Do a little bit at a time, create those habits, reinforce those habits. And so think about habits for nutrition and rest, sleep. So what habits can you have for drinking enough water? What habits can you have for exercise? Start small. What habits can you have for sleep? Start with a little bit at a time. Instead of developing 27 habits at once, which is a recipe for total failure, maybe develop 1 or 2 at a time. Maybe you can drink Vital every day. Maybe you can replace candy bars with homemade cookies, something along those lines. Start with those habits. Okay, next. Definitely take adaptogens. And hopefully I don't need to say much more about this, but I just want to remind you, you have a lot of adaptogens to choose from. They all help your body deal with stress. That means they will all help you with burnout. Think about what you're already doing. Maybe you can up your game a little. Maybe you can try for a week to do something at more of a therapeutic dosage. You want to create a result. And so pay attention to how your body reacts. A lot of times it's easy to get stuck in this idea, and I've certainly done this, where I think, well, this should work. And so then I do it because it should work, but I don't listen to my body to see if it is working. So listen to your body. Okay, next one. Exercise that helps is just enough exercise. It is never too much exercise. And we are in a culture that is totally dysregulated about exercise. The idea is that you just have to go kill it. Just go kill it, and that's better. And then if it hurts, well, no pain, no gain. You just work through the hurt. Listen to the experts. They just say, just do a lot. Just exercise all the time. And when you're burned out, sort of the same thing as having adrenal fatigue. And what we know about adrenal fatigue is that exercise actually is not helpful. For a long time, I myself remember being exhausted after exercise. Exercise made it worse. It made everything worse. I had to recover from exercise, but there are lots of years where I would push myself to exercise anyway because of the culture, because that message that I heard that said, you just keep pushing. Don't be lazy. Just keep going. Just keep trying. It eventually will work. And what it eventually did was it did not work. And so If you're too exhausted to exercise, think about what else you could do that might count as movements. Go slow, start small, but be consistent, be persistent. So don't do too much, it's pro-inflammatory. Do just enough, just enough. Next. If sleep is simple for you, like I said, awesome. If it's not, sleep often is a sign of burnout, trouble sleeping, insomnia, dysregulated sleep of some sort. So it can be a sign of burnout, and it can also precipitate. It can start burnout. Sleep trouble can also set off depression. But as you're seeing, these things all kind of blend together. Depression, burnout, adrenal fatigue, they kind of feel the same in a lot of ways. So sleep is really critical. You know about sleep hygiene. If not, you can certainly look up sleep hygiene. Getting a regular schedule, having a routine, finding ways to relax your body. Maybe you need some renew at night for a while. I think I'm talking way too fast here. Don't forget downtime. A lot of times people ignore downtime because they feel like they should be productive all the time. I'm sure we all know that person who cannot sit still because they feel like they must be productive. They're driven. You need downtime. Downtime is also not necessarily the same thing as just watching TV. And so you want downtime or leisure time that actually rejuvenates and feeds your body instead of sucking away more energy. But being productive is really not your goal here. Relaxing is the goal. Keep thinking, what might help? How can I listen to what might help? There are lots of combinations that might help. Maybe you need 10 things. And so if you do 3, that might not be enough. Don't give up on those 3. Okay, next. So to summarize, we talked about signs of burnout. We talked about the mental physical connection. Just rest more isn't going to fix it. Definitely take adaptogens for stress. And we live in the world we live in, so you might as well just always be taking adaptogens. Take action, but not with the extra caffeine. Caffeine actually contributes to burnout. There are a number of studies that show that caffeine makes things worse, makes burnout worse. Food, water, exercise, sleep, as you know, the 4-legged or the 3-legged stool with the fourth, the seat on it. Creating habits instead of just expending your energy with willpower and then not freaking out. You want this to be sustainable. That's what you need. Okay, next. Next is Why Soul Works in July. I'll turn it back over to you, Kendall.
Thank you so much. As I listened to your presentation, several things came to my mind, and the first thing was you talked a lot about 3 slides, in fact, of all the different symptoms of burnout, and so burnout could look completely different to everybody, to several different people,
right?
And so some people might be experiencing it, and somebody else might be that they're noticing, and they're like, "Oh, they're burned out. I'm not, because I'm experiencing different symptoms." And they might even think, "Oh, I'm just being silly. I'm just, I'm being lazy for the past few months or
Love
whatever."
that. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then you might find yourself getting into a situation where you're deeper in it, and you could have, if you had recognized it, you could have started to do some things about it.
Right.
So I
And
love
a lot
that.
of times
Go ahead.
people think that it's a temporary, if I just get through this, then they don't think about the impact of I just need a little more caffeine for the next month. Or, well, I'm just going to stop at McDonald's until I get through this. Then it will go back to normal. Except by then, the effect of all that extra caffeine and processed foods has taken you farther down the road toward feeling terrible.
Yeah, and you talked about this, all these pieces, all these causes, in the circle graph, that you could make your own graph, all the different things that might be causing it for you. And that was powerful to me because there were so many things that contribute to that, and you could look at all those different things, and then, like eating an elephant, you could bite off one of those things and handle it instead of going, I've got to solve this whole problem all at once. You could solve, you could look at each one of those things and start to solve it. Starting with maybe fabric softener. I saw that on your list. Using fabric softener
Yes.
was one of the things. I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, and no kidding, because people are so acclimated to it. They don't realize the load it has on your system, that there are things in it that literally are neurotoxic. That means they literally kill brain cells. And so a lot of times people think, oh, it's just fabric softener. When my husband and I stopped using fabric softener and we switched, this was many years ago, he didn't have a problem with it. I was the one who was sensitive. But he told me after a couple years that he also himself could no longer walk down that aisle in the grocery store. He said, I can't even do it. And he said, I'm starting to be bothered by people's laundry and the smell of their clothes. And I thought, yeah, you don't have it for a while, and your body starts to see, oh, this is what real life could be like. And you recognize that
Yeah.
it is really pretty bad. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I hate to say it, but it's the same thing for cologne and perfume. That's much more unpopular opinion, but it's still scientifically backed.
Yeah, and that's one of many things, both physical and mental, that could be setting you off or sending you down that path that you could correct.
Right.
The one thing that, the reason I think people assume that it's just the one cause, overwork, is because that tends to be maybe the thing that sets people off. Do you think? Is that?
Right. It might be that last straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes you're like, I want to get through this next thing, and you climb to that hill, and then you look up, and there's another hill, and then you look up, oh, there's no end to it. So if you don't, if you're just trying to get to the next hill, then it can be this feeling of overwhelm instead of enjoying the
Right.
journey and the small successes along the way.
I think of the word sustainable a lot, and particularly as it relates to what you just said. If you can think, I need my life to be sustainable, it can't be the sprint anymore. It has to be sustainable because I'm here for the duration. And so I want the duration to be pleasant. So let's think about there's a lot I need to do. How can I do it in a sustainable way where I actually enjoy my life?
Hmm. That's fantastic. Um, you mentioned that it's kind of in today's society, it's normal to be burned out. Everybody's burned out. I'm burned out. You're burned out. Everybody seems to be that. Is that, you feel like that is uh, a social thing that, bringing notice to it makes you feel like, oh, maybe that's what I'm experiencing? Or do you think there's more or causes that are causing more burnout in our lives today?
I think both. First of all, it's sort of like a badge of honor where people say, "Oh no, I worked 65 hours last week. I'm better than you who only
Yeah.
worked 42." And someone who says, "Oh, I work 32," then you think, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice to be him?" Of course, I can't. But it's sort of like, yeah, and so I get a gold star. Uh, and then the other idea that you're hitting on is this idea that there are lots of things out there that can create some of these symptoms. We don't pay attention to them because we normalize them. So if you even think about, you get new furniture, you've got formaldehyde off gassing in your furniture. We discount that. We ignore it. We think it doesn't really count because you don't see the impact on everybody, and you don't see the impact in a really quick way. If we all started fainting every time they walked around new couches, then something more would be done about it. But there are only a couple people who faint. And so it's that buildup of all the things in your life that make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. The other thing, the last thing that you said that was really powerful to me was this idea of willpower and habits. Willpower is just there to get you to form a habit. And so if you think about it in that, because usually you have to go, I've got to develop this willpower and I've got to make it last for the rest of my life, to get this done. Right. If you just think, oh, I just need to have enough willpower to get me to create this habit so I can do this day in, day out, then that seems manageable.
Totally manageable. But the willpower won't last for the rest of your life. It won't last for a month.
Yeah.
You can't use it that way. And so once you hit that habit, then you don't even have to think about it. And it is almost effortless. So developing habits, that's like the way to live on Easy Street.
I love it. And with that, thank you so much. So enjoyed our discussion today, and I'm looking forward to our next time, which will be on the 16th of July, on Tuesday the 16th of July. And Alison, Perfect. You'll be back to talk about the more mental side of it, which I'm so excited about. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So yeah, man, thanks for joining us for this really important discussion. Join us next month on July 16th for that. And then one thing I wanted to mention is that if you want to be reminded of these live events, then you can first text the word events. Well, first, in order to get on the text stream, you have to text the word soul to this number, and that puts you in our general soul block, and then you text the word events to this number as well, and then you'll get special reminders for these events. So you first have to do the soul to get into the block, and then we separate you out to tell you about events. So you have to do those two things to get in there, but you can do that to be reminded if you'd like, or you can go on YouTube and click the little subscribe button and the notify button, and it'll notify you as well. So thank you for joining us. I had a good time and I learned a lot today, and we'll see you next time on Why Soul Works.